Mr. Chair, you are live.
Thank you very much. I'm Gene Godley, the chair. With me tonight is Willie Sampson, Scott Anderson, Robert Shapiro, and we're honored to have our next member who's not yet sworn in, Harold Siegel. So at the beginning of this, I would like to welcome Harold, who after this meeting will be voting because he's sworn in tomorrow. And I would like to thank all of my members for their service. And I think we have Ross Arnett with us, so I would like to give him our gratitude for joining us also. You have before you and also we have Kimberly, who is recording secretary, Carrie Berger, assistant city attorney, Kevin Scott, senior planner, and the person that keeps us straight. And I think that's who I basically see. And Madeline is handling our technology. You have before you an agenda. And so if I have no concerns about that, I'd like to have a motion that we approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve.
So moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Okay. That was approved unanimously. You also have before you the minutes from January the 25th. I have reviewed them and have no concern. If there are no concerns, could I have a motion that they be adopted?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Scott moves, Robert seconds. All in favor, aye. Aye. So the agenda is approved. I'm sorry, the minutes are approved. We have 4 findings of fact, and I would like to take them one at a time. The first one is Yard LLC, and you have before you a revised findings of fact that incorporates some additional language that I added to the very excellent job that Kevin did. So do I have a motion to approve the findings of fact for Yard?
Make a motion.
And Willie moves. Scott seconded. I'm sorry, Robert seconded. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
The second is the Jabin family estate. I have no concerns about that. If no one else does, could I have a motion we approve?
I can make a motion, please, sir.
Scott, approved. Robert, second. All in favor, aye. Aye.
Aye.
It's approved. City of Annapolis, the Street Inn Park at Cheston. Can I have a motion to approve that? So move. Robert approved. Robert moved. Scott seconded. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
And then the last one is James and Kathleen Mott. Findings of fact. Can I have a motion on that?
Move.
I'll make a motion.
Again by Scott, seconded by Robert. All in favor, aye. So the
Aye.
findings of fact are all adopted. So tonight we have two applications, and so we will take the first one, Robert Seri and Bimby Beach, and this is I know we've had 2 adjacent properties that are also interested in this, and so if you will let, I think we should just let the applicant and everyone into the room so we can begin with the presentation.
Good evening. My name is Scott Milkey with Waterfront Engineering.
Hold it just a second, Scott. Let's be sure everyone is in the room.
Do we need to get sworn into?
Yes, that's why I want to be sure everyone's in the room so we can swear everyone in at one time.
They are all in. Just
Okay.
one of them hasn't turned her video on.
Okay. Can I have everyone raise your right hand? And do you swear to tell the truth to the court wardens upon penalty of perjury to the best of your ability?
I do.
Okay. We now have the application before us. And so, Scott, would you like to, I assume you're going to make the presentation, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Scott Milkey?
Yes, sir.
Okay, would you proceed and summarize your application for us, please?
Peter Sari proposed to construct a 6-foot by 60-foot floating pier with a 4-foot by 15-foot gangway and install one mooring pile. Also, he'd like to replace in kind a 6 by 88 fixed pier, which includes a 10 by 30 fixed platform, install a PWC lift and a boat lift with 2 boat lift pilings. Additionally, there would be a bulkhead of 78 linear feet to be replaced as well.
Okay, I have, until I hear the other testimony, I have no questions. Does any of the fellow Port Wardens have any questions? If not, we have public testimony, and Mr. Milkey and Mr. Sari, please stay because I'd like to hear their testimony before we proceed with any further questions. So, and also this is one of the first times that, in my memory, that that zoning has planning and zoning has actually opposed an application. So I have a question for Kevin Scott. Scott, do you have any comments before we proceed? Kevin?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kevin Scott with Planning and Zoning. Yeah, we're recommending denial of the application because the proposed pier extension is likely going to cause congestion on the waterway, specifically to the adjacent properties, one of which is the city of Annapolis's property that is on lease to the Crab Marina. But both of the adjacent property owners have indicated their concern, and the developable waterway kind of bottlenecks as you get closer to the harbor line. And we think that the development should stay closer to shore to leave that open area for navigation.
Okay. Thank you. I would now, I'd like to hear from, I guess from Crab. Let's see, is someone representing Crab?
Yes, they're here. Do you want public testimony to be admitted as a panelist so they can turn their video on, or do you want them to just have the ability to talk?
No, I'd like for them to, turn their video on. I'd like
Okay,
to,
great. Then someone from Crab should be in a second.
okay. And I'm sorry I wasn't clear about that because I need to swear them also. And can we just go ahead and admit the people, Ed Hartman and others who have asked?
Yes, I can do that.
Yeah, let's get everyone so we can swear everyone in at one time.
Yes, the only public testimony that is not here is Amy Clune, but someone else from Hartman Law is here.
Yeah, I assume there would be the same thing. Okay, for those that have joined us, Ed and others, Mr. Shannon, if you're going to make any comments, can you please raise your right hand so I can swear you in to swear to tell the truth to the Port Wardens to the best of your ability upon penalty of perjury?
I do. I
Thank
do.
you. Thank you very much. Well, let's first hear from Crab. Mr. Bollinger, would you begin, please? Can't hear you, Mr. Bollinger. Sound?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There you go. Thank you.
Members of the Board of Port Wardens, we appreciate the opportunity to provide our comments regarding the expansion of the docks next to our property, which is, as Mr. Scott stated, it's owned by the city of Annapolis, and it has been leased to Chesapeake Region Accessible Boating for 40 years to be the adaptive boating center for the city and the state. Our docks have been installed, and for that we wish to thank the Board of Port Wardens for their approval for the installation of the docks. And just to let you know that in the time it took to get your approval, MDE, DNR, and the docks constructed took us 10 months. So we are very pleased that we were able to do that. And we're moving forward now with the demolition and construction of the buildings on the site to build what will ultimately become the premier adaptive boating center in the country. What gets us to our concern is that the extension of this dock could severely negatively impact the operations of crab sailboats with people with disabilities, recovering warriors, and children from underserved communities who will be sailing with us. Specifically, our docks and our boats are all docked entering in the channel adjacent to our neighbor. This is not something that will come in on the other side where Bemby's property is. Will be coming, all the sailboats will be coming in this area. We have concerns as it relates to construction. We don't know when that would take place, because if it were to take place during April through October, that would very negatively impact our operations, with the construction barge being in this narrow channel and entranceway to the crab docks. Right now, based on the information that I have been provided and we have reviewed, thanks to Kevin Scott, the floating dock, which was originally proposed for 100 feet in length, has been reduced to 60 feet, which still places it immediately adjacent to the 5-foot buffer, which draws into question is someone building a 60-foot floating dock and not going to be allowed to dock any boats on the right side of that dock, because they will be impacting the buffer, and actually an average boat beam of 10 to 12 feet would be well inside of the crab property. The drawings as they're shown now do not show where the pilings are to support the floating dock. So if those pilings are used as D-rings on either side, they're going to be in the buffer zone. So that's something that I think needs to be addressed and is of concern. Also, the fixed wooden docks that are there now are proposed to be torn out and replaced. Right now, the docks extend into the buffer zone, the platform as it is called. And this encroaches, or would encroach, because that means any boat accessing that platform or behind the dock for a proposed boat lift would be coming into the crab property. So that causes us some concern. The piling that currently extends on the right side of the platform is not indicated as the other pilings are off of the platform. There's two that are marked by X's, and the one on the far right is just a pencil dot. And right now that is a piling that is fully inside of Crab's Marina and is proposed to stay. The recommendation that we would have is that if anything is to be built, that the concept of replacement in kind, while interesting, it continues to perpetuate a problem that was created when the Williams owned both properties, and they were not concerned about any encroachment on each other's water rights. So with this dock being taken out, we believe it should be moved outside of the buffer zones, so it's completely within their own property, and that the limit for the number of slips, which is 3, according to Kevin Scott, is taken into account when this dock is built so that it's not overbuilt to accommodate more than 3 boats. This property was investigated by a boat retailer, and they looked at putting in 6 slips there. And ultimately, that person decided not to buy the property because he found out that he was going to be unable to put 6 slips into this space. And last but not least, I'd leave the chairman and the board with the understanding that there is an opportunity now with the new construction of this dock for it to come into compliance with the buffer zone setbacks and not encroach on other adjoining property, so that we don't create another Wells Cove and have a situation that would potentially negatively impact the operations, where we're going to be sailing over 100 days in a 6-month period in and out of this operation. This is not where we tie up boats at our dock like a typical marina and you don't see the boats ever move. We're going to be moving these boats in and out constantly, taking 2,000 people to 3,000 people sailing and boating throughout the 6-month season. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bollinger. I have one quick question. Actually, it's 2 questions. Do you know the distance between the end of the proposed 60-foot floating pier and your 80-foot floating pier?
No, sir, I do not know the exact distance. That's something I had asked Kevin. I guesstimated it was around 25 feet, something like that, at an angle.
And my second question would be, if that floating pier were to be truncated, putting aside the old deck, but that floating pier, the new floating pier, if that were to be truncated, theoretically, say in half by 30 feet, would that be acceptable?
I think it would be much better, because that currently is just about where the pilings are right now off of the platform. So I would have it difficult to object, other than to say, if the dock is currently situated as it is, and they're proposing that the floating dock actually extend at an angle off of the platform. And I know you're going to have engineers say that that's not a great way to have a dock. So I think it's a great time to keep it within its current boundaries, because it was designed for 3 boats. And if it went out 30 feet, Mr. Chairman, I believe if the docks themselves were straightened out, that would be much less of a problem.
Okay. And I ask those questions because we have to consider what, impedes traffic and what's navigational hazard or obstruction to navigation. So it's obvious 30 feet would be less of an obstruction than 60 or 90 or 100 or some other figure. So, okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I speak? I can answer
Yes.
that question. It's 36 feet from between the end of the proposed floating pier and their existing 80-foot floating dock at the T-head.
Scott, while I have you, can you just quickly answer the question that was raised on where the pilings will be for the floating pier, which are not indicated on the drawing? Are they
well, usually
outside?
we don't indicate them on the drawing, just because depending on the dock manufacturer that they pick, it can be anywhere. So, but we can ensure that they would be at the end of the pier and on, opposite sides, not sitting in the setback. We would need one at the end, but we could keep the other ones inside the setback line.
But that would be on the side of that pier, which would.
Correct, but it would be further back, like halfway out.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Bollinger while we have him here? Any other questions of the Port Wardens? If not, I think we will move to Annapolis Landing. And Mr. Hartman, are you going to make the presentation or?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I'd be happy to.
You're recognized. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. First, I would simply say that I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to testify on behalf of Annapolis Landing Marina. And I apologize to Mr. Sari for perhaps being a rough neighbor, but that is the situation we find ourselves in. I echo Mr. Scott's sentiments as well as Mr. Bollinger's sentiments. But I also would like to point out a few additional things. If you look at the drawing, the proposed construction, which contains what appears to be a sailboat tied up next to the floating dock, there's no way that sailboat can get into that slip without violating the developable waterway area of our marina, unless it's basically airdropped in, and that's not a practical solution. It's also, I don't know how long that boat is, but it may be 35 to 40 feet long. But obviously this dock could handle a much bigger boat. The other side of the dock, of that floating pier, could also handle boats. It would be an impossible situation to police or anyone to have to call DNR or call Beth over at the harbor master's office to run over and issue citations whenever a boat is believed to have violated these setbacks. It's an impossible solution here. And as far as the pilings go, I believe pilings require permission from this Port Wardens as well. So they must be included on the drawing. And the absence of those makes the drawing incomplete in and of itself. Additionally, the pier was originally laid out, as Mr. Bollinger explained well, but it is clearly in violation of the existing and newly drawn lines. Therefore, any replacement must fit within that. So the unfortunate reality of the physical construction of these properties is that any new pier can only be smaller than the existing pier and can absolutely not extend out 30, 60, or 5 feet from the old pier. It must be pulled back, fit within the existing lateral lines into their developable waterway area, such that vessels can dock on either side of that pier without violating the other neighbor's space. So that would be a violation of all of the standards that require to be applied by the Port Wardens. So essentially, I don't even think a T could work unless it is pulled up about 40 feet closer to the pier. Again, as Mr. Bollinger pointed out, this was constructed consistent with an entirely different structure next door, but it was purchased as is with the full knowledge that there are problems with its potential development. As Mr. Bollinger said, someone else looked at it, but I also looked at it as perhaps an extension of our marina, but it doesn't work for us either. It is a very, very difficult piece of property. The water rights and the lateral areas just don't work for this particular structure. So we would ask that this application be denied. And I would just remind, I know this board knows the law well, but the applications can only be accepted or denied. They cannot be amended or adjusted during the hearing process. And so I would request that this wouldn't be rejected until such time as one which complies with all the laws is proposed. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
I have a question based on your presentation of this fictional boat, or whatever what it is, and you basically said it cannot get into that slip without transversing someone else's developable waterway. Do you contend that a boat has to access a pier within one's own waterway? Because we have in my experience, we've had a lot of situations where boats will go over an adjacent property and adjacent developable waterway to get to their dock. And so this is a new concept for me. Are you saying that is the law?
I'm saying that is a factor that you must consider in determining whether to approve an application. While certainly vessels are permitted under general maritime law to traverse all navigable waterways, to design a system that requires interference with a developable waterway of your neighbor, especially when that does not pre-exist, because that extension does not exist, would be to violate, I believe, all of the standards that the city code sets forth for the port wardens to follow in determining whether or not to accept or reject an application. So in this instance, you would be ensuring that that large sailboat or a larger boat would be coming very close to our pier there on the left, the long straight one. And because we are permitted to have large boats there. That is the whole purpose of that pier. And we do have large boats. There will not be room if we are permitted to use our space. That means that the boat that perhaps enters into a contract for that slip all of a sudden is legally blocked from using that slip. That is an untenable situation which should not be approved, because it creates danger and it creates interference with valuable riparian property rights. So that is why I believe that it's something for this board to consider.
This drawing shows your existing pier next to this, but it shows no slips, boats, what have you. So can you explain to me, are there boats tied up adjacent to that existing pier and sort of what their beam is and how far over they do extend?
Sure. Well, of course, they change. They change from time to time, but this is where some of our larger boats are. There's a 70+ foot Hatteras tied up there by one of the owners of the Renaissance Festival. There are, and you often have large catamarans tied up there. Actually, Philip Shannon is online. He is the general manager of Annapolis Landing Marina. He can probably tell us, but this is the pier for those boats. Most of the other ones are limited to 30, 40, maybe even 50 feet at length. But if we have a big one or two, which we always do, and we get more and more as the years go on and people get wealthier, this is where they go on both sides of that pier, because those are our developable waterways. Philip, do you want to chime in there?
If you look at the aerial photograph, it's a little more specific on what is an existing catamaran we have at the end of what we call G dock, it's listed as existing pier, which I can't even see that 45-foot sailboat getting in there with a catamaran tied up at the end of what we call G dock. And then behind that is what we call G4 for G dock. And there's an existing vessel there that is beam is approximately 25 feet, would not be able to get in and out, let alone with just the floating pier, let alone a sailboat tied up to it. So that's the problem with the floating pier, is our customer or slip holder could not get in and out of G dock with a floating dock there.
Thank you. The arrows are helpful, very helpful. Any other questions for my fellow port wardens? Is there any other testimony from the public? Any other comment? First of all, I'd like to say that both the application and the staff report recommendation will be placed in the record. And I'm concerned about the congestion, as well as the recommendation from the city that this be denied. It does seem to be very confined on both sides. Do I have any other?
Can I say something?
All right. Can I also make a comment too as the applicant?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Hartman, I understand where he's coming from, I guess, but he's talking about squeezing another boat. If you look at sheet 2 of 15, you can clearly see his catamaran parked at the end of the G dock, I guess he calls it, which is it's not in this 5-foot setback, but you can see the lateral line. And then he's talking about putting another 25-foot wide catamaran behind that, which would obviously be in the setback and would have to traverse Mr. Sierra's waterway, but it's the public waterway. It's not the Hartman's waterway or the Sierra's waterway or the city's waterway. It's everybody's waterway, and there's no restrictions on one being able to maneuver in front of somebody's pier or around somebody's pier to get into your slip. So I'm not quite sure what he's getting at about, being in his water area with moving a boat in and out of a slip. And also on sheet 4 or 3, I'm sorry, 3, that is the size boat that Mr. Sierra is planning on purchasing. And that is why the extension for the pier, and we clearly show that we can fit within the adjacent to the pier and outside of the setback and the lateral line. One other question I would have, I guess, if we just replaced the whole pier in kind and the pilings as is and didn't do anything else and applied for a dredging permit, would that be acceptable to the city?
I can't answer that. Well, I can't speak on behalf of the city. You mean just replace in kind, including the T at the end that overlaps the 5-foot setback? And
Yes,
and then dredge.
unfortunately, MDE will not let us move that T. It has to be exactly in kind.
And then dredge where what? I mean, I don't know what we're talking about.
The left side of the T head. I guess I'm asking if we can just replace the pier in kind and apply for a dredging permit so he can get his boat draw is 8 feet. So that's why we have to get out to that distance.
And I'll also add that there's, and Mr. Bollinger can attest to it as well. Just, over the last winter, there's been a lot of silting in that area. There's a lot of, inside the T, between the T and the shore, there's only, maybe 2 feet in that area. So we're just going to abandon those 2 slips. That was the plan, and just try to get out to some deeper water without having to dredge, so we could get a boat, on, at least 2 slips, and then the boat lift. Obviously, you don't need a lot of water for that. That would be our 3 slips we're entitled to as property owners. This is all residential. We're not doing anything commercial, but we want to be able to use our water space that we're entitled to use. So, we're not trying to block anybody. We just really want to put a sailboat on the west side of the floating pier, maybe from time to time on the east side, but primarily on the west side, and a boat lift back off the T. So it's really not, the point of the longer dock is not to make things congested. It's just to get out to deeper water. So,
but you want to put it on, you say you want the flexibility to put it on either side,
right, because we have 3
setback?
slips. Right, so 1 slip is on the east side of the floating pier, 1 slip would be on the west side of the floating pier, and the other boat lift would be the 3rd slip. Those are our 3 slips. That's the way we look at it. We wouldn't be putting 2 boats on one side. That's not our intention. The reason we have the 2 pilings off of either side is that if we get a storm or a lot of wind, or we're not with the boat for a period of time, we can pull it off the floating dock and have it, something keeping it, from banging into the floating dock. So we're really trying to be as minimal as possible, but using the existing footprint of what's there. Everybody has built around us. The Annapolis Landing is built in, I think, the 80s, and the Williams on the other side, and now the Crab Pier was built long after this was. So, this dock has been here since 1960. So it's obviously worn out, needs to be replaced, but we're trying to shrink down on the Annapolis Landing side and move the pilings inboard a little bit to give them more room over there. We're trying to stay, as far away from Crab's Pier as possible, but Crab's got 36 feet to get an 8-foot beam boat in. That's plenty of room. So, we're really trying to work with the neighbors here, and we feel like, what are we doing wrong?
Well, can I ask you, maybe I misunderstood that in regard to the floating pier, you want the ability to put that sailboat on either side, including on what I guess is the east side next to Crab.
Yeah, that's one of our slips.
That would be over, that's one of the slips, but to put your boat there would be over the 5-foot setback and over the lateral line. And you want
that's
that
an existing slip.
What?
That's an existing slip. There are 3 slips off the end of the T right now. So we're just using the existing slip.
But that doesn't entitle you to moor a boat over the lateral line.
Are you saying we can't put a boat there right now in our existing 60-year-old dock?
Floating pier. Okay, I now have a question for Crab. Crab, I think it's been established that distance between the end of the proposed floating pier and your floating pier is 36 feet, and the point was raised that you're getting 8-foot beam boats in and out. Can you talk to me a little bit more about your view of the congestion under those facts?
Well, our boats are generally, Mr. Chairman, our boats are generally sailing. So as you can imagine, this is not a power boat going into a slip often, even though we are motoring at times. We are having our boats handled by people with disabilities. So having adequate leeway on both sides is just smart boating. I think the fact that we've got a piling inside of the crab property now, and the fact that it's been established that boats will be docked on the east side of the floating dock, well inside of the crab property, again, continues to throw gasoline on a fire in that it's a problem. And what we want to do is try to fix that problem while something's being rebuilt completely and would provide the slips that the property owner has a right to without encroaching on our property. And the other thing is this is a 40-year lease for these the docks. I can't tell you what kind of boats we may be using in 10 to 12 years. We may have a different kind of boat. So at this time, it's 8-foot beam. You sail in, you have your boom out. That's another 6 to 8 feet. So there you are talking about 16 feet. So that's kind of the dimensions that you're working with there.
Are all your sailors experienced sailors?
Yes, they are, sir.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Ann Matthias. I'm one of the co-applicants with Peter Sorry. Can I make a quick comment?
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for hearing our application this evening. I know it's a little complicated. I just wanted to address two things. First was the comment from the city about the placement of our proposed extension would further congest the developable waterway. And I think it's important to point out, as you can see in all the drawings, that both the Annapolis Landing Pier and the new Crab Pier extend much further, and in fact looks like in both cases over the harbor line. And I just wanted to challenge that assumption on the part of the city that by our putting an extension on our existing pier, we're going to further congest a public waterway that's already, we're already enclosed by those two existing floating piers. Or existing piers floating on the crab side and fixed on the ALM side. So that's my first point. My second point is what Peter mentioned earlier, is that this dock has been there for 60 years, 50 plus years. And Crab knew it was there when they built their current floating configuration, which actually doesn't quite line up with what their original permit was, but we can leave that to another discussion. But so their dock is there. They knew our dock was where it is. They knew our pilings were where they are. And our existing T is actually closer to one of their piers than our proposed extension would be to the end of their floating pier. So if 36 feet is a problem with our proposal, our current pier, which they knew was there when they designed their dock, is even closer to their existing dock, and they didn't have a problem with it at that point. So I don't feel like this argument that we're somehow narrowing the waterway for them to the point that they can't come in, wing on wing on a full, downwind sail it's just not a very convincing argument to me, especially since they have that less than 36 foot width with their other piece of the pier on our side, and less than 36 feet on the east side of their pier near the Bemby property.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I've done all the questioning. Do we have any
Mr.
follow-up?
Gotti, one other thing I noticed, on sheet 2 of 15, the aerial with the catamaran at the G dock, on the east side of the G dock. There's a piling behind that we were planning on removing. There's less room between that piling and the stern of that boat. There's no way a boat could maneuver out behind that without that front boat moving out of the way. So Mr. Hartman's argument that they can't get another boat through there is it's just incorrect. You'd have to pull that boat out of the way to get a boat through there.
Excuse me for one moment. We have both of those slips are active, and that vessel can get into its slip behind the catamaran presently.
I think the point was that if there was a large boat on the west side of that extended pier, which does not currently exist, that boat being right up against the developable waterway and perhaps into ours is one that would actually block the ability of our boats to leave their slip. And so that's the issue raised with the impact on the east side of GDOT.
Well, let me just speak really quickly to the type of boat we're going to put in there. I mean, we're talking about, a sailboat. It's probably going to be, the keel will probably be about at the 8 foot, but we've designed the space, just barely enough room to fit a boat in. I've done the dimensions of the boat, and it fits within the lateral line with a foot to spare. So, but our point is we need more depth. Whether it's by dredging or whether it's by building a dock out. We prefer a floating dock. We don't really want to dredge. I mean, that's something that it's bad for the environment. It just doesn't seem like it's necessary. But as far as the concern that we would be over the lateral line or blocking your boat in, I just would say, if you want to put a 25-foot wide boat on that pier, like Scott just said, you're going to have to move it out of the way to get the one out from behind it, if it's a wide boat. If it's a narrow boat like you have in there now, you have the Annapolitan 2 up out on the end, and you have a smaller pilot boat behind it, you can get it out, and you'd be able to get it out if our boat was there. So that's you're really not losing anything. It's almost no difference.
And I just would like to second that and say, and I'm going to apologize to Mr. Hartman and Apple's Landing for being a difficult neighbor, but you can't have it both ways. You have been using and you want to use the waterway in front of our dock in order to slide your other boat behind the catamaran. And at the same time, you're saying, your main concern about this application seems to be that we will prevent you from doing that because we're going to actually use our waterway. So, that you knew our dock was there when you built your dock, and we're actually removing a piling and moving the pilings in a little bit, so it makes it easier. But you've just benefited from the fact that there was the Williams Marina right next door, and so Mrs. Williams really didn't dock any big boats there at all, but she could have, which would have required you to do the sort of like back to front parking with your docking with your boats like you do in a parking garage. So you can't have your cake and eat it too on this. Like, we all have a right to use the waterway.
The difference is that we obtained our permits in compliance with the law. You have to do so also. When you saw this property,
that's why we're here. That's why we're here.
If you guys would like to go outside and talk, I'd like to take a little control of the hearing. In looking at the proposed floating dock, realizing, as Mr. Hartman said, we're thumbs up, thumbs down. We can't negotiate. But this floating dock extends, I don't have good spatial visualization here, but assume 10 feet behind the stern of the sailboat. I've seen many situations where that could be truncated somewhat. Why do you need a floating pier that long that goes behind, that far out? And it just appears to me as just visuals looking at, this 3 of 15, that length is not needed for that sailboat.
Right, and let me just speak to that really quickly. It's not the length. The length isn't a problem at all. It's the depth. It's the water depth. Right there.
No, where you've got the sailboat, you can extend that out 100 feet, and it's not going to change the depth of that sailboat is.
Well, no, I'm talking about why we have a 60-foot. When we're, we maybe don't need a 60-foot long. Maybe I misunderstood your question. We have a 60-foot long floating pier. The point is to get out to deeper water where, it's a sailboat. So it takes 8 feet of water.
If it were a low winter tide, you want, excuse me, you don't want it out 100 feet.
Well, if it's not adequate depth where it is now, then we'd have to haul it out in the wintertime.
Okay.
We acknowledge that. But
Okay.
even so, we've seen water depths quite below, I would say even the 6 feet it shows off the end of the T, more like 5. And that's supposed to be mean low water. So it's a lot more silted in there now than those depths actually indicate.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Fellow port wardens, any views, discussion? I'm concerned about the occlusion of the waterway and the narrowing of it, and which I'm following the city's guide, have some concern about the restriction of navigation on both sides, as well as that might not be needed. So do we have any motion to come before us? If not, I move we deny this application.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Any opposition? The application is denied. Next application is Yard. Would you please let all the applicants and all testimony in, please?
Yep, they are on their way. They should all be in soon.
Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, do we have Chris Ledoux? Emmanuel, I mean all parties, including Tomasini and Ledoux. I want to swear everyone in at one time. If
Yes,
Mr.
they
Ledoux.
I'm here.
should still all be on their way.
Okay. If anyone's going to speak tonight, I would, or may speak tonight, I'd appreciate if you'd raise your right hand so I can swear you in. You swear to tell the truth to the port wardens to the best of your ability upon penalty of perjury.
I do. I do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so I don't know if Mr. Templeton or Scott are going to present this application, but welcome. And whoever's going to present it, would you please summarize it for us, please?
Good evening, Chairman Godley and all the port wardens. My name is Cardi Templeton, and I am one of the family members who owns the Yard LLC, and I am grateful for your time this evening and also for your reviewing my new application to replace the existing fixed pier at the end of 3rd Street with a floating pier. Before I describe it, may I ask if all the submissions on the eTrackit list are made a part of the record?
I will make the application, the staff report, and I don't know all the application on that, but I'm happy to make them part of the
Thank you.
record.
I sent in a support for water access and a clarifying use of the pier pieces, and I know Mr. Tomasini and also Mr. Young sent something in as well.
Okay, I did not see those, but you're welcome. One, they'll be made part of the record as you request. And secondly, you might, for our edification, kind of describe them if they're relevant and you want to do that.
Sure. And maybe even if you haven't had a chance to look at the clarifying use of the peer document, maybe I could even screen share so that you can see it. I think it might be helpful.
That'd be fine.
Great. So in overview description, I want to let you know, all of you, that I have listened to everyone's concerns and I have come up with a better plan. This design is essentially one long main dock that is intended for catamarans on the left side and boats of a variety of sizes and shapes on the right-hand side. They will all be tying up alongside the main dock, so their bows or sterns will be headed towards the harbor and the bulkhead. They will not be stern to the main dock or bow to the main dock. The existing mooring piles, of which there are a few on the left side or the 3rd Street side, will be removed. And 2 finger piers will extend just to the same location as the current mooring piles. And I will not let boats tie up beyond the ends of the finger piers. So that means for those slips on the left side, the finger piers then define the edge where the current mooring piles are, and we do not encroach in any way on the existing fairway there. As you saw in Mr. Scott's recommendation for approval that I think was dated March 8th, this plan meets all the necessary criteria in Title 15, so I won't take your time reiterating those criteria. I would like to mention that I submitted a letter that was officially addressed to the Annapolis Water Access Coalition to express my support in writing for public water access at the street end. And also that should the city want to install a floating dock there at some point, you know, a 10 by 20, I think is what has been discussed, I would be happy to support that when the time comes. And that was then accepted by Joe Donahue, who's the attorney for the Annapolis Water Access Coalition, and he asked that we send a copy to the Civic Association, the Eastport Civic Association. So we did, and that is one of the documents that I sent in. The other document, if I may screen share, provided a little explanation for how the dock would be used. And let me just show you, let's see. That's the one I want to share. And let me do a page up. There we go. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the plan view for the dock. And these are the catamarans. They're a little faint, but they're in green. Can you see them?
Yes.
So the idea here is that the sterns of the catamarans will be, you know, about a foot away from these finger piers. And as I said, the boats will be alongside. So they're tied up on the main dock. This one is, you know, the bow out here probably because the stern against the finger pier, and the same here. And I wanted you or everyone to be able to see that we're not extending into the fairway here at all, and we don't plan to, and we won't. So that is what I wanted to, would you like me to keep it up for a couple more minutes? Otherwise, that's what I wanted to show you.
I think I've absorbed it, and it's, you know,
Okay.
not unlike sheet 5 of 12. But if any of my port wardens differ, or, you know, I'm more than happy to
I
Yeah,
can put it back up.
I think we have the concept. Thank you.
I am happy to answer questions. As you all see, Scott Milkey and Chris Nolker from the Waterfront Engineering, Design and Construction Company are also here too, if you have questions for them.
I just want to clarify, since we now have a lot of experience together, that you pledged no boats tied up that would extend beyond the finger piers into the fairway, period.
I absolutely pledge that, and I would even be happy to tell you how I plan to accomplish that if you'd like.
How would you accomplish that? I would like.
So we have a practice at the business, and we have had for a long time, of getting very specific with our prospective slip tenants, asking them the length, beam, draft, and use of their boat. And we get down to the inch because some of our slips are a little narrow and we want to make sure that the slip tenants can fit. But that also means we are very clear with people about what will and won't. We also put that length, beam, and draft and that specific boat name, hull ID number, et cetera, in the leases that we do with our tenants. So the lease is only for a particular boat. And we are also very specific in our leases about where they're allowed to tie up. So I can promise you that not only will we ask to be sure, but we will put in the legal document. So we have some kind of meat behind it to say you cannot be wider than X and you cannot stick out beyond the end of, the side of the finger pier. And the good news about having the finger pier is that we can walk out and see, as could anybody else. We can go stand on the end of it and look and see and line ourselves up with the other ones and make sure they're not.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Templeton from any of the other port wardens? Robert?
Yeah, very quickly, and I believe you said this, Cardi, you're not going to protrude outward towards the alley beyond the existing pilings, or I realize you may have to relocate a piling for the floating pier, but they won't be any further out towards the alleyway, right?
There won't be any mooring pilings like there are now. Those need to get pulled.
Okay.
And the plan has the finger piers stop at the outside edge of those existing mooring piles.
Okay.
Now, what's a little tricky is that the mooring piles, there's 3 of them. So we've drawn lines along the outside edge, and then we've lined the finger pier up with the line. And that's where that dashed green was on my diagram.
Okay.
Have I answered your question?
Yes, thank you.
The fairway is not going to get any narrower where those catamarans are.
Right, okay.
Any other questions? If not, I think we have Mr. Tomasini, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. My name is Mike Tomasini. I'm a resident Eastport, 212 Eastern Avenue. Also own and operate Pirate Adventures on the Chesapeake and have been since 2003 at Cardi Templeton's Marina. I did send in written testimony. My support for this project is 100%. What I will say, just because I heard Cardi's presentation just now, the specificity that Cardi talks about in how she deals with slip tenants has been my experience for 20 plus years. And I think anecdotally, even so for slip holders that were going to be on or adjacent to the same pier as my business, to make sure that those customers understood, those slip tenants understood that they were going to be awakened at 9:30 every morning with screaming children backing out of the slipway. And along the way, she has always, proposed that people who are going to be tied up on that dock, that they know who the neighbors are and what the other uses are on that dock to make sure that they don't, they won't have a problem. And that's the kind of hands-on marina management that you don't necessarily always see, right? Well, we're going to dock you behind a diesel fishing boat that leaves at 5 in the morning and you're a liveaboard sailboat. That might be a problem, but Cardi attempts to handle that in the very early stages of her lease negotiations between slip tenants. And so I think if Cardi says that she's gonna do it and she's gonna manage it and make sure that nobody extends beyond the pilings, then if I'm attesting to her truthfulness on this, and if I'm using my experience in the past with Cardi and her family, then that's enough said.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have a lot of experience in gaining her trust, although we don't always agree. And I think now we have Mr. Ledoux. Did you have comments to make?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I appreciate your time. I'd like to, Mr. Chairman, if I'm not looking directly in the camera, it's because I've got two screens and I sort of have an outline of my remarks. So I'm not being rude, I'm just reading them. So it's nice and concise and you know.
I like concise. Please proceed.
Right. Thank you. So Chris Ledoux, I live at 215 Severn Avenue. I live directly across from the applicant's property at 222 Severn Avenue. I request that the board please consider the public's interests as noted in section 1516.020, 1516.030C, and 1560.030E, and to do so in a consistent manner as applied in similar matters, including those involving this particular area of the water. This may include a standard applied next door, which was called should not or cannot apply or impede any further. Here, this would not impede any further into other developable waterways or navigation or making it too tight or confined should the boats remain tied up to the main dock by the side and not tied up stern to the main dock, or not extend past the pilings. So I greatly appreciate the clarifying use record or whatever this document is. We're calling this document that outlines Ms. Templeton and the yard's plans. I greatly appreciate the applicant's sincerity and commitment and her pledge to keep the boats tied side to main dock. But my concern is that this pledge is only the pledge of Ms. Templeton, who I believe is honest. I consider us friends. Chairman, like you said, sometimes we just disagree. We historically have a situation here in Annapolis where people are looking back to all kinds of historic agreements. The port wardens here know this. This comes before them. There was agreement in 1973 that people could walk between, you know, some people's property or something. And so what I suggest, consistent with the planned use of the applicant, and to ensure that there's no further impediment in the developable waterway here, is I request that it be made a condition to any approval. We have a lot of experience with these types of pledges. I do believe for as long as Ms. Templeton is here and her family owns the property, that she will keep her commitment. I'm not worried about that, but we don't know what will come. And if this truly is the pledge, there shouldn't be any problem with making it a commitment and a condition to the approval. In addition to the code sections I cited, I ask you also apply the required standards under state law, Maryland Local Government Code Section 5208, 3 and 4, which requires you to look not only at the present and proposed uses, but the planned uses of this water. To this point, I point to two factors here. First, this street end is used by the public for recreational purposes at the end of 3rd Street. There are plans for a floating dock for the public's recreational use. The timing, the funding, and other infrastructure issues are to be determined. And of course, such would come before this board, but there should be no dispute that there are plans to do this. The second thing is there's a potential use for an electric ferry. The City Council recently unanimously approved the electric ferry for Eastport, and according to the City Council, the mayor planned to use the 5th Street street end. The City Council wants the city to look at all potential sites of street ends. Personally, I'm not an expert. I don't think it would work at 3rd Street, but nevertheless, it's still on the table. And therefore, I think that consistent with what we've talked about, there should be no further impediment to navigation while that is being considered by the city, and would easily be solved by adding this pledge as a condition. So So consistent with that, I recommend that you take the applicant up on the offer and the pledge and protect the community by making it a condition to the approval. I am passionate about protecting the last few bona fide public points of access to the water. This is not the case where we're claiming a sewer line easement is somehow a boat ramp, nor is this a case about talking about walking on anybody's private property. This is a legitimate point of interest. Alternatively to the floating dock at 3rd Street, and with all Eastport Creek street ends on the table for the electric ferry, I also draw your attention to all the developable water areas on this application. The applicant is required by code to provide you with a drawing of the lateral lines of the developable waterway areas on both sides of the property. There is a reason for this in the code. And while most of your attention is on the 3rd Street side, I want to draw your attention to the 2nd Street side, which is part of this application and is part of the submission. Boats are currently tied up in the public bulkhead, as shown in the submission. I've checked with the city clerk, and there's no record of city council leasing this bulkhead to anyone, whether it's the applicant or her tenants or anyone else. So I raise this to the Board of Port Wardens with the hopes that you are truly committed to safeguarding public water access. Not only is that a violation of 1510-010, but as submitted as part of this application, it also constitutes a barrier within the developable waterway area, directly interfering with the public shoreline under 1516-030E, in my opinion. So I propose that you add a condition to this approval and the city not issue the building permit until such time as the applicant or tenants enter into an acceptable agreement with the city for the use of the bulkhead in the public and the developable waterway. I would not expect there to be any objection to that, because all I'm simply pointing out is that that's the law. And with that, Mr. Chairman, again, I just ask that the pledge made tonight be made a condition so that the public going forward can be assured, no matter who owns the property or whenever, something else happens in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ledoux. Alderman Arnett, you have, as usual, patiently listened to us. Do you have any comments, or did you, anything you would like to add?
No, I think that the application is straightforward. I do have some sympathy with making it a condition. We do have a history of having things that are ancillary pieces of a paper or agreement, and they get lost to time. I have not talked with Ms. Templeton about that, but it seems like a pretty straightforward, reasonable thing to do. But other than that, I think her application has been very clear. I think she's been responsive to comments made by the Port Warden on the previous applications. I have heard from members of the community, including the water access group, and I'm not hearing any opposition to proceeding with this approval of this application.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, do I have a motion? Oh, Ms. Templeton. Oh, wait, let's hear from Ms. Templeton, and then go ahead.
I would be happy to receive a condition on the use on that side. And in fact, maybe I could share my screen and throw out a suggestion in case the Port Wardens would like to consider it. Because on the application, here I'll share the screen again. Here we go. Or both the application and also the submission. See these dashed lines here?
Yep.
Right, that show what I mean. Maybe the dashed lines could be used as the condition. So the dashed lines, that parallel the bulkhead and go along the fairway side. It's just a thought, since we have those and they're on the application as well.
Okay, thank you.
If you want to put that condition on, it's fine.
All right, Scott, you were
I'm
about?
good, thanks.
Okay. If there's no other comment, I'd like to make a motion. We approve this application conditioned upon no boats being further into the fairway than the end of the finger piers. And I say that, Ms. Templeton, just because I think finger piers are more easily enforced than dotted lines if you're the harbor master.
It's part of why we put them where they were, so we can all go out and see and be sure. And I can tell my tenants, stay right of this.
Okay, so that is my motion.
I second that.
Mr. Henson seconds. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
So you are approved. And I want to tell you just personally how much I appreciate all of your strong effort, courtesy before a board that obviously didn't always agree with you. But I want to thank you very much. And so that concludes the agenda. I would like to express our appreciation for Kimberly, who's recording this, and for Madeline, who is supervising it. But most of all, I would like to propose a resolution to the board that we express our appreciation to John Butler, our former port warden, who has resigned, but who did extremely contributive service on the port wardens. So I move to express our appreciation to John Butler.
I second that, yes.
And it's unanimous. With that, is there any more business to come before the port wardens? If not, I appreciate everyone's time, courtesy, patience, and we look forward to seeing you next month.